We continue now at the top of Daf Kuf Mem Vav Amid Aleph in Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 146a. The Gemara continues, V'yomer Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, and Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says, Kol Yemei Ani Royim. Again, this is the pasuk we quoted on the previous Amud from Mishlei. All the days of the poor are bad. And so Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says, V'oika Shabbos V'yamim Tovim. What do you mean all of his days are bad? What about Shabbos and Yontav? On those days, the Ani, the poor person, eats well. So that's not a bad day. It's not all of his days that are bad. And the Gemara answers to that, Kiddush Shmuel. This follows what Shmuel said. The Omar Shmuel, because Shmuel said, Shinoi Vest, when a person changes his regiment, when he changes his regular schedule, Tchilas Choli, that's the beginning of illness. So even on Shabbos and Yontiv, when the Ani has good food, but that's a change in regiment, and therefore that also is considered to be something that is bad. And the Gemara continues, Ksiv b'Sefer ben Sira, it's written in the Sefer ben Sira, Kol Yemei Ani Royim, again the pasuk says, all the days of the poor are bad. Ben Sira, Omer, Ben Sira says, Af Leilos, even the nights of the poor are bad. Bishval Gagim Gago, because his roof is lower than everyone else's roof. Mimtar Gagim Lagago, so the rain goes from their roofs to his roof. And Barum Harim Karmo, and at the height of the mountains, his vineyard is at the highest point. So may offer Karmo Lekramim, so the soil from his vineyard is swept down to the other vineyards, and so that's bad for him as well. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hasholeach Sivlonos Lebeis Chamav, one who sends gifts to his father-in-law's house. This is talking about after the Erusin, when his wife-to-be is going to be living still at her father's house, and he sends gifts over there. Shalach Sham Meya Mon, if he sends over there gifts that are worth 100 money. V'yachal Sham Seudas Chasan, and he eats over there the meal of the groom, he eats the Seudas Chasan. Afilu B'dinar, even if that Seuda is only worth a dinar, so Einon and Nigvin, the halach is he's not able to collect that gift back, he doesn't get it back. Let's say the marriage doesn't happen. But Lo Achal Sham Seudas Chasan, but if he doesn't eat over there the Seudas Chasan, the meal for the groom, Hare Elu Nigvin, so then he could collect the gifts, he is able to get those gifts back. And the Mishnah continues, Shalach Sivlonos Merubin, let's say he sends a lot of gifts, Sheyachzeru Imo Leves Bala, that the idea is she's going to return with those gifts, she's going to bring them with her to the house of her husband, so Hare Elu Nigvin, those kind of gifts can be collected, but Sivlonos Muatan, but if it's a small amount of gifts, Shetishtamish Bahen Bevesavia, that the idea is she's going to use those gifts in her father's house, so then Ein Nigvin, so then those are not able to be collected by the husband. And the Rashbam explains, Hasholeach Sivlonos Minog Chasanim La'achar Kiddushin. This was a custom of the grooms after the Kiddushin, after the Erusin, the betrothal. L'machar es sholeach lebeis chamav l'chavad ishto tachshitin u'minei peiros v'kadei yayin v'kadei shemen. The next day, he would send to his father-in-law's house for the honor of his wife all kinds of gifts. U'pa'amim ochel sham ima, and sometimes he would eat there together with her. And so then the Mishnah said, Einon Nigvin, they cannot be collected, talking about a situation where he did eat the Seudas Chasan over there, meaning im meisu o shamesahi, let's say he dies, let's say she dies, o shechazar bo v'rotz lagarsha, let's say he retracts, he wants to divorce her, shamachmas chibas simchas achila, the reason why he can't get the gifts back is because why did he give those gifts? It's because of the fact that he was able to rejoice and eat, sha'achal v'shasa, he ate and he drank, v'samach imon, he rejoiced with them, so therefore because of that simcha, machal sivlo, so therefore, he forgave all of the gifts that are generally consumed. Now, let's say he was talking about gifts that are not consumable, so then Hadri, those actually would return, even though even though he ate and drank with them, those kind of gifts, the Gemara will say, he actually does get back in the Tanya B'Gemara, as we learn in the Braisa in the Gemara. And the Rashbam continues, Uvesivlonos stam mayri. Now here in this first part of the Mishnah, we're talking about general gifts. The halakamon, because further on, maflig besivlonos shashalach, they're going to make a distinction with the gifts that he's sending, kadesha yavo imo lebeis balo, lesivlonos shashalach kadesha tishtamish bevesavia. We're going to make a distinction between gifts that the intention is she brings those gifts to her husband's house when she gets married to him. And then there are other kinds of gifts where the intention is that she uses those in the house of her father. That distinction the Mishnah is going to make at the end of the Mishnah. V'hanu lo talu, and those kind of gifts, they're not dependent b'achilas chasan. They're not dependent on whether the groom eats the meal with them or not. Mechlal dereisha, and that implies that the first part of the Mishnah, b'stam sivlonos, it's just general gifts. V'hanu tuluyin b'sudas chasan. It's the general gifts that are dependent on whether or not the groom eats the meal. Im achal imoin mecholin v'im lav nigvin. Again, if he eats with them, so then it's considered that they're forgiven. He's not going to get them back, but otherwise he's able to collect them. And again, the end of the Mishnah, Shalach Sivlonos Merubin, if he sent a large amount of gifts, that the idea is she brings it back to her husband, Upeirish, and he explains, he states explicitly, Kadesha Yavo Imal of Bala, that these are going to be brought to her husband's house. V'uadin Lemuatim, and the Rashbam says the same is true if it was a small amount of gifts, as long as this was stated explicitly. If it was sent with that intention, so it's the same idea. But the Mishnah is just talking what happens in the standard scenarios. When a person sends a large amount of gifts, he usually explains that the idea is that it's going to be brought with her to the house of her husband. And when it's a small amount of gifts, generally speaking, it's understood that she's going to use them in the house of her father. And the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, Dafka dinar, it has to be specifically that he eats a meal, a sudas chasan that's worth a dinar, aval pachas midinar, but if it's less than a dinar, that doesn't count, and in such a situation it would not be considered that he ate the sudas chasan, and therefore he would be able to collect back the gifts that he gave. And the Gemara says, Pshita, isn't it obvious? What is Rava telling us? That dinar tanan, it says in the Mishnah dinar, so of course it has to be a minimum of a dinar. And the Gemara says, no, ma'u detema, what might you have said? Hu adin dafilu pachas midinar, the same would be true even if it was less than a dinar. V'hayda katani dinar, and the only reason why the Mishnah said a dinar, or chadimilsa katani, that's generally the case. You're going to eat a meal is going to be worth at least a dinar, and so kamash malon. So that's what he's teaching us, meaning that's what Rav is teaching us, that it is a minimum amount. It has to be a dinar. If it's less than a dinar, that's not considered to be a suudas chasan. And the Gemara continues, Achal Tanan. It says in the Mishnah that the chasan eats. He eats over there the sudas chasan. So shasamai, what would be the halacha if he drinks something over there? Is the halacha the same, that if he drinks something, so then he's not going to be able to get back the gifts? And it says Hutanan, it says he's the one that ate over there. That's what it says in the Mishnah. Shluchamai, what if his agent ate? Does that count? And Sham Tanan, it says he ate over there in the house of his father-in-law. Shagar Lomai, what if his father-in-law sent him the food? Does that count? What's the halacha in that case? And the Gemara says, Tashma, come in here, the following proof. The Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, because Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says, there was an incident where a certain person, he sent to his father-in-law 100 wagons of pitchers of wine and oil, v'shal klei kesef, v'shal klei zav, and silver vessels and golden vessels, v'shal klei milas, and fine wool vessels, v'racha b'simchaso, and he rode and he was rejoicing, v'halach v'yamad al pesach beis chamav, and he went and he stood at the entrance of the house of his father-in-law, and they brought out a cup of something hot for him to drink. V'shasa, and he drank. V'meis, and he died. V'zu halacha hela Rabbi Achasar Habira l'fnei Chachamim, and this halacha was brought by Rabbi Achasar Habira before the Chachamim le'usha, to Usha. V'yamru, and they said, Sivlonos v'asuyin libolos ein nigvin, that if it's gifts that are generally consumed, he's not able to collect that back, meaning it's considered like he really ate by his father-in-law in that case. V'shein asuyin libolos, but again, as the Rashbam said earlier, if it's something that's not consumable, nigvin, that can be collected, that is allowed to be taken back. And so the Gemara says, Shema Amino, you see from this incident, afilu shasa, that even if he drinks, that's enough. He doesn't have to eat something. In this case, he drank, and that was considered to be a su'udas chasan. The Gemara continues, Shamat mina afilu pachas midinar. Do we understand from this incident that even if it's less than a dinar, because if it was just a cup of something hot to drink, that's probably less than a dinar? The Gemara says, not necessarily. Amar Rav Ashi says, Man lei malon to lo shachi lei marganisa deshavi alfa zuze. Who says that he didn't grind up a pearl that's worth 1,000 zuz v'ashke, and he gave that to him to drink? That was part of the drink, meaning it's possible that it was worth more than a dinar, and so therefore there's no proof that less than a dinar is considered to be a sudas chasan. And the Gemara continues, Shamat mina, should we see from this incident, afilu shigrulo, that even if he sent him the food, because over here he sent him the drink, he didn't eat it in the house of his father-in-law, and again that seems to be considered that he was eating the sudas chasan by his father-in-law. It's the same thing. The Gemara says, not necessarily. Dilma, maybe kol pesach beis chamav, at the entrance of the house of his father-in-law, which is where he took the drink, kebeis chamav dami, maybe that's the same as being in the house of his father-in-law, but if it was really sent him and wasn't even by the Pesach, maybe that would not be considered that the chasan partook from a sudas chasan together with the father-in-law. And the Gemara continues, they had the following question, Ma'u sheyeshalem, the gears of the Masoras Hashas here is sheyeshalem and not sheyeshalesh. Ma'u sheyeshalem shevach sivlonos ma. What's the halacha in terms of the enhancements of the gifts? Let's say the chasan is getting back the gifts. So what if there was shevach? What if there was profit? There was enhancements? Does he get that back as well? Kevon di isnu l'didei hadri b'reshuse shavoach. Do we say that since if the gifts are still around, so then really it would return to the chasan, and so therefore it's considered to be in his possession, that they improve prove that they were enhanced, so he gets the shevach as well. O Dilmar maybe came the avdi o mignavi, since if they were lost or stolen, boy shalumele, so they'd have to pay back the value. So therefore, since they owe money, so birashusa didashavach, so therefore really it's in her rishus that it was enhanced, and she's allowed to keep the shevach. The chassan will not get back the shevach. And the Gemara says, the Gemara leaves this as a question. And the Gemara continues, Boy Rava asks the following question, Sivlonos Hasuyin Livlos, let's say you have gifts that are generally consumed, Velo Bolu, but they have not been consumed yet. So Ma, what's the halacha? Are those returned to the chassan? And the Gemara says, Tashma, come here, the following proof from what we quoted above. Vizu halacha hella Rabbi Achas Arabir lefnei Chachamim Beusha. This halacha was brought by Rabbi Achas Arabir before the Chachamim in Usha. V'yamru, and they said, Sivlonos Hasuyin Livolos and Nigvin, if it's gifts that are consumed, they are not collected back by the chassan. V'shein Hasuyin Livlos Nigvin, but if they're not consumed, then they can be collected. So my lav, so is it not? Afagav the lo bolu, as long as they're generally consumed, even though they weren't actually consumed, a nigvin, so they're not collected. And the Gemara says, lo, no, not necessarily the bolu. It could be we're talking only about the gifts that have actually been consumed, but maybe even if it normally is consumed, but it was not consumed yet, maybe that actually is returned. There is no proof from this halacha from Rabbi Achasar Habira. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here, another proof, Sivlonus Muat, and it says at the end of the Mishnah that if there are a small amount of gifts, Shetishtamesh Bohen, that she's supposed to use them, Vihi Bevei Savia, she's supposed to use them in her father's house, so then Ein Nigvin, so then they're not collected by the chassan. So it sounds like, again, it's something that is supposed to be used, but it doesn't matter if it was used or not. The chassan is not going to get those. And the Gemara says, Tir Gemara Rava interprets that to mean, Beva V'savchata, we're talking over here about a snoot or about a hairnet. The idea of Rava's answer is that these are very insignificant items that certainly the chassan was mochel. He has no intention of getting them back, and that's why by these kind of sivlonos muatin, it doesn't matter if they were consumed or not. Again, the chassan is not going to get back these insignificant items. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, Ma'isa b'adam echad, there was an incident with a certain person, Sheshagar lebeis chamav yayin chadash v'shemen chadash uchlei pishtan chadash batzeres, that he sent to his father-in-law's house. He sent new wine and new oil and new linen garments at the time of Shavuos. And the Gemara says, Ma'ika mashmalan, well, what is this teaching us? The Gemara says, if you want, I could say, Chashivusa d'Eretz Yisrael kamashmalan. It's teaching us the greatness of Eretz Yisrael, that in Eretz Yisrael it's possible to have these new products, that they have ripened, that they're ready even by the time of Shavuos. You can already have Yayin Chadash and Shemen Chadash already this early in the season. And if you want, I could say it's teaching us as follows: the time that if he makes a claim, he says, "This is what I sent." Ta'nase Taina. So we believe that claim, meaning we believe that in Eretz Yisrael again these products can be available so early in the season. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, Ma'isa b'adam echad, there was an incident with a certain person, Sha'amru lo ishto tosranisi, that they told him that his wife is a tosranis, means that she's not able to smell. V'nichnas acharel l'chor b'lavodka, so he followed after her into a ruin in order to test her, to see if she had a sense of smell. Amar lo, he said to her, Reach tzenon ani meiriach, he said to her that I smell the smell of a radish begalil, a radish in Galil, that's the smell that I'm able to smell over here. And the Rashbam explains, Sha'amru lo ishto tosranisi, they said to him that his wife is a tosranis, choli, that's a kind of an illness. She'eni yechol lahariach, she's not able to smell, umumsha b'seisru, that's considered like a hidden blemish, and so therefore he wanted to test her to see if she had this blemish. Nichnas acharel l'chor b'lavodka, so again he followed after her into a ruin to test her sham, to test her over there. V'nasa imo b'socheko tzenon l'nasosim tareach, he brought with him a radish to test her to see if she's able to smell. V'yesh mefarshim koseves natal b'socheko v'lo tzenon, some say that he actually brought a date inside, and it was not a radish. V'karov l'galil haya ma'isa, and this whole incident happened close to Galil. That's why it's mentioned over here that he said that I smell this smell from the Galil. So Amar lo, he said to her, Reach tzenon ani meriach begalil, he said I smell the smell of a radish in Galil. L'nasos, again this is to test her, im tariach, if she's able to smell it, shemitoch devaren nikar im tariach, that from what she responds he'll be able to see if she has a sense of smell. Ve'alatznon shebesocheko Amar, he was referring to the radish that he had to see if she could smell it. And the Rashbam says, according to the version that he was bringing not a radish but a date, lakach Amar la reach tzenon, that's why he said I smell a radish. According to this version, ladasim teshivenu davar lemor reach koseves ani maricha v'lo reach tzenon, he wanted to see is she going to respond that I smell a date and not a radish. Again, it's the same basic idea. He's testing whether she's able to smell, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Kuf Mem Vav Amid Beis.